Assistance, I think she would say trusting, but one of the nicest things that ever happened to me was my daughter got up and gave a speech for me a couple years ago and said that I had emboldened a hard work ethic in her. And she said that she had trained, we had basically talked to and trained both of our kids to be hard workers. And to me that was a point of pride, certainly, because if your daughter says that about you, it means that your wife is telling your daughter. And to me that means that's been communicated down.
Well, my wife is here with me. Actually, I've not been to any forum where she hasn't been here with me, and I've told people, you cannot effectively run for Congress if you don't have your spouse standing beside you. And I've said it teasingly, but I mean it. I was like the preacher that said, Lord, if you call me to preach, call my wife first. And when we got into this congressional race, we both have the burden for this. I also have my children with me, Christ and Madison. I'm not going to stand up here and brag about how wonderful I am because they know that wouldn't be true. Nicole will tell you I can be very stubborn at times. When I get something set in my mind that I'm going to do it, well then that's what we're going to do, and we work together to get it done. And so lots of stubborn times out on the campaign trail. Yesterday I got in a fight with the T-post driver and about lost the tip of this finger. But sometimes stubbornness can help. I think we need some stubborn leaders in Congress, and I'd be honored to be your stubborn leader in Congress.
We kind of lived this for a while. I think my wife would say a Christian man. We've got 3 kids ranging from 17 to 12. Wife and I have been married for over 20 years. We've endured deployments and separations. So when you get ready to go off for 6 months to Kuwait or Iraq or Korea or anywhere else, there has to be a trusting, loving relationship. There has to be compassion. There has to be dedication and commitment that you know that the other side of that relationship is carrying the water while you're away. Even when I was working at the Pentagon, talk about some long days. You're starting off 5:30, 6 in the morning. I'd make sure I was back home in time for dinner, spend time with the kids, get them to bed, go back into the office, and up about midnight, 1 o'clock, get some sleep, and then go back in. I mean, that's just the life that you have to live. She's been with me every step of the way all those years, and she likes my humor. She sees me smile more. That's what brightens up the room for her. Sometimes I don't do that often enough. But I would say the Christian approach to relationship building, loving, compassion, and dedication to doing what's right.
Well, I know exactly what my wife would say. She said I was good looking, hot, and the sexiest man she ever met. And then she figured out I was stubborn, hard-headed, and not afraid of a challenge. And in all seriousness, a challenge is what's in front of us. You know, if you're not a little bit uncomfortable, then you're not growing. And I'm not afraid to grow. I'm not afraid to improve. And my wife and our relationship has constantly improved. It's something that we have to work on. When we had kids, it brought on a whole new challenge. When we had the company and we first started out, it brought on a whole new challenge. This brings on a whole new challenge. And each day I wake up hoping that I don't disappoint my wife. And I do my best to love her to the point that it almost hurts. But I just want to say, babe, thank you for the 15 years. It's been awesome.
Our next question will begin with George Faught. If elected, would your focus be on enacting new legislation, trimming current legislation, or something else?
Well, that's an easy question for me because I think someone could go and get rid of government and spend their entire time there and be better off, and Americans would be better off. One of the things that I've got experience in is that I'm the chairman of the Administrative Rules and Government Oversight Committee at the State House, where we actually set back rules and push back against state agencies where they can't implement what they want to do. We're seeing that happen on the federal level with the EPA. We're seeing it happen with banking regulations. We're seeing it happen in every aspect of our lives. So I've got the experience where this year when these agencies have come, we want to do this, we were actually able to block them. You can take the same type of principle to the federal government and let's block what agencies are doing in our lives.
Sitting on one of the tables that has the Pettigrew plan on it, one of the things that's featured in there pretty prominently is program obsolescence. It talks about situation where basically every federal program comes up for review either every 5 or 10 years, depending on how we decide to do that. And that program would have to be reauthorized or it would go away. So certainly, the problem we have with government is growing too big and too ominous, too over-impressive, and it was never intended to be this size. And that's our problem. We don't have a way for it to go away, and we need that. I would name 3 things very quickly that need to go away. One is Obamacare. Number 2 is the Dodd-Frank bill. And number 3 is the EPA rules. If we could repeal those 3 laws that have all been passed under this administration, then I think we'd very quickly see that the economy would jump up hugely. We'd probably see the biggest economic expansion that we've seen since the Reagan years. You throw that in with the other reforms that need to be done, and this economy will take off. This economy wants to grow. These bankers want to lend money, but Obama has obviously passed legislation that causes problems.
I have said throughout this campaign that when a politician wants a press release, they pass a bill. And when a congressman or a politician passes a bill, it's a new law that you and I have to live under. We have more laws than we've ever had in the history of our country, probably in the history of the world. We need people that will go to Washington not with the ambition of creating new bills, because those are new laws, but we'll look at some of the old bills that we can do away with. This reminds me of, I think it was Will Rogers that told the joke. When Congress passes a law, it's a joke. And when Congress tells a joke, it becomes the law. That's the problem in America. Every time you read a press release about a politician that's passed a bill, watch out. It's a new law that you have to live under. I have the distinction, you know, politicians brag about serving in elective office. I have the distinction of never having created a law that you have to live under. And I think that's a good distinction. And I think we need to send people to Washington with that distinction that will try to dismantle many of the laws that you and I have to live under. Thank you.
The reality of our world is both, right? Because each issue is unique in its context. So sometimes a problem comes up, you need some kind of regulation that addresses that. Most of them passed need to go away. In addition to Dodd-Frank, you've got Sarbanes-Oxley. Obamacare needs to go away. The tax code, in my view, needs to be replaced. But to do away with the current tax code, you need to enact something else on the Fair Tax Act. So it's a mixture thing in the real world. You know, we ask our legislators to do things. Border security needs more funding. It needs immigration reform. Those are new rules and regulations that have to come into effect. But there are others that do need to be sunsetted. You know, Department of Education, Department of Energy, and EPA all need to go away. So that's legislation that has to be passed to get rid of certain things. If you want to change the debt ceiling, if you want to issue more bonds, all those are things, activities that Congress undertakes. They're each unique in their own context. To say it's one or the other really isn't fair, or at least it's not understanding the landscape. You just have to have wisdom and the judgment to handle each situation appropriately as it comes along.
Without question, it's trimming. Look, underneath the Bush administration, there was 10,600 new regs passed. And half the time, this current administration has passed 10,200 new regs passed. Today, as I stand in front of you, our company spend over 40 cents on every single dollar we bring in the company to comply with a new mandate or a new reg. Now get that number in your head. Now, nearly 21,000 new regs have been passed in a decade. And I'm already spending over 40 cents, and they say they're only implementing roughly 30% of those new regs passed because that's all they can afford. We have to start attacking from the outside. And for us to stand up here and say, we're going to get rid of the EPA, we're going to get rid of the Department of Energy, we got to have a plan to know how to do that. And you do that from attacking the regs that are already in place and showing everybody how ridiculous and absurd they are, how politicians can really sit up there and say that they're trying to get this economy back on track by passing stuff like this.
Well, ditto to all the above, but let me come at it from a little bit different angle. I think one of the key things that we've got to get away from in our society is every time something happens, we've got a bad cultural mentality of what is the government going to do for us? How is the government going to fix this? Let me tell you something. I don't want the federal government fixing anything. I want them to get back to the 8 enumerated powers in the Constitution. Let's get back to the 10th Amendment. Let's get back to the states. Let's get back to letting us fix our problems. And until we can get rid of that mentality, every time something happens, what are you all going to do looking at D.C. We've got to get rid of that. We become so dependent upon D.C., we're giving up our freedoms. We're giving up our liberties. Our founders said that once you start giving up liberty for security, you're going to lose both. And that's exactly what we're doing. Let's do it ourselves. So I'm not looking to go up there and pass a lot of bills. Let's repeal a bunch of bills, as everyone's already stated. Let's do all these things they've stated and try to create a mentality of let's fix it on the state level.
Our next question will begin with Dwayne Pettigrew. In several recent surveys, 82% say the economy is the single most important issue on voters' minds. Last week, President Obama said the private sector is doing fine. What is your response?
Your color is the sky of your world, Mr. Obama. No, the economy in Oklahoma we have not seen what's going on in the rest of the world. I do business in 11 states. And folks, let me tell you, the economy is not doing well in those other 11 states, or other 10 states that we do business in. And I can tell you that. I mean, we do business in Detroit. Go to Detroit and find about a 34% unemployment rate. That's what they're announcing. I think 31% is what they're announcing. It's higher than that. But it's bad, folks. We're not seeing what's going on. I think what we've got to do, obviously, other than fixing our debt and deficit issues, but we've got to get the government out of the way, as Markwayne talked about on the regulation side. We've got to get ourselves back to the point where we actually have a free market business cycle. What happened to that? Federal government has become, again, over-aggressive on that, and we need to change that.
I believe we've had 3 bailout packages. The first one with the Bush administration, $800 billion. The second 2 with the Obama administration. Our unemployment rate today is higher than it was before we passed the first bailout. All of that money we borrowed. We didn't have the money. 43% of every dollar our government spends today, it borrows. Government is not the answer to turning the economy around. Look at Europe. Greece was bailed out 6 months ago. Tonight their interest rate is 21%. Spain's unemployment is 23%. I've seen statistics in Washington, D.C. that the unemployment is 51.7%. You know, the other half work for the federal government. Our economy is not doing well. It's growing. The unemployment rate is growing, and we are trying to address that by growing the federal government. And that's not the answer. We just have to look to Europe to see that that's not the answer. Socialism will not work in America.
I think it's plainly obvious that the president doesn't live in the real world, certainly not the world that we occupy. He's an intellectual elitist. He's arrogant. He's driven by ego, and his view is he is the smartest guy in the room, even if nobody else agrees with him. He has a solution to the United States. He's trying every trick in the book to try to impose his worldview on the United States. He views himself as above and beyond this petty national kind of thing, as some kind of a globalist. He doesn't understand what the country stands for, and I don't think that he views himself as a proud American. And his wife said as much there on the campaign trail. So it's a person who's detached from the reality of the United States. The best thing we can do for this country is vote him out of office this coming November. I don't know much more I can say about the guy. I mean, everybody wants to cover the ground, but you know, our job should be to get the vote out, to get Romney elected in, and get rid of Obama.
You know, his statement shows the absolute disconnect that our career politicians have become. I mean, come work with me for a day and tell us that all of us are doing fine. I mean, come and look at my safety coordinators and my compliance officers and my HR department that we had to hire to try to compete with the government regulations and mandates just to stay in business. You know, we had 3 keys to being a successful company, and it's customer service first, hire, fire right, and pay as you go. And those 3 things used to be just fine to be successful in business, but now it's regulations that we have to compete with. For him to sit up there and say that, man, it just puts so much fire in my belly. It makes my jaw get set so hard and say, this right here is why more people like us need to be up there representing us.
Let me say it this way. His statement is true based on his direction. His statement is true based on where he wants to take the country.